The suspicious tradition. The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any cathedral on Earth, with towering crystal pillars glowing in soft blue light, and banners from 1,000 worlds hanging high above the chamber floor. Every summit was a spectacle of power and pride, with each species eager to display their fleets, their warriors, and their strange machines of war. Alien soldiers in gleaming armor stood at attention behind their leaders as symbols of strength. Some wore exoskeletons of metal, some carried living beasts bred for battle, and others showed weapons that hummed with energies unknown to humans. Yet amid this glittering and intimidating display, the humans entered quietly. Their delegation was small and simple, only a handful of ambassadors, historians, and scholars dressed in modest suits. They carried no weapons, no armored guards, no fleets hovering in orbit waiting to strike. The humans bowed respectfully and took their seats among the delegates, and as they did, whispers rippled across the chamber. It was not the first time Earth had behaved this way. For as long as any alien could remember, humans came to peace summits without soldiers, without warships, without the proud displays that every other species brought. It had become a tradition, and to many it was a mystery. Why would Earth come unprotected when every other world knew the importance of showing strength? The simple answer offered by some was that Earth was weak, that humans had no true military to parade, or that they were too afraid to measure their forces against the rest of the galaxy. In the galleries high above the floor, alien spectators laughed softly at the humans' humble arrival. They compared them to fragile birds hiding their claws or to prey animals wandering among predators. A young warrior from a newly joined species sneered openly, whispering to his comrades that the humans were cowards, and that Earth survived only because the stronger species tolerated their presence, but not all shared the same opinion. Among the older and more cautious members of the council, there was unease. For though humans came without armies, there was a strange weight in their presence, a confidence that did not match the image of weakness. The human ambassador, a tall woman with sharp eyes and calm gestures, walked slowly to the center stage. She spoke not with force, but with steady words about peace, cooperation, and the future of the galaxy. Her voice carried easily across the chamber, and though she had no warriors standing behind her, every listener felt as if unseen eyes were watching them, weighing them, considering their worth. The ambassador's calmness unsettled some of the delegates who expected pleading or submission. Instead, she spoke as if Earth had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. When the speech ended, many applauded politely, but the whispers grew louder. Why had Earth once again refused to bring its military? Some called it foolish. Others claimed it was arrogance. The rival empires who thrived on shows of power looked at each other with smirks, convinced that one day Earth would be taught a lesson. Yet in the shadows of the chamber, a few alien veterans remained silent. They had fought near humans before in battles long past. They remembered the way human soldiers fought, not as machines, following orders, but as predators, adapting to every change in the field. They recalled the stubborn endurance, the refusal to surrender, the terrifying creativity in the midst of chaos. Those memories were rarely spoken aloud, for they carried a weight of dread. A veteran Kith soldier sitting in the corner of the gallery whispered to his companion not to underestimate Earth. His eyes narrowed as he studied the calm ambassador. He had seen human soldiers without armor charge through fire with nothing but determination and turn battles that should have been impossible. His companion laughed at him, but the old soldier did not join in. The summit continued with speeches, promises, and negotiations, but the question of Earth lingered over the hall like a shadow. Why do humans never bring their military? Why do they hide what every other species shows so proudly? The young and reckless mocked the answerless mystery, while the wise and weary kept their silence, sensing that behind the quiet traditions of Earth there was a reason that no one truly wished to face. And so, the first day of the summit closed with laughter, suspicion, and unease. The humans departed to their simple quarters unguarded and unafraid, while the rest of the galaxy puzzled over the strange choice. For the galaxy believed strength must always be shown, yet Earth seemed to believe that true Strength was something better left unseen. The mockery turns serious. The second day of the Peace Summit began with more ceremony, as new delegations arrived and the chamber filled once again with the sight of glittering warriors and banners of power. The humans entered as they always did, quietly and without spectacle. They carried books instead of weapons, records instead of banners. Their ambassador walked with the same calm grace as before. Yet the air was different on this day, for the whispers had turned into open questions. An envoy from the Zarelith Alliance, tall and scaled with armor that shimmered like blades of glass, rose to speak. His voice was sharp and mocking. He declared before the council that Earth was an insult to the summit, that every world had come prepared to display its might while the humans brought nothing. He asked what purpose Earth had in this chamber, if they could not even present their soldiers or their ships. His words stirred laughter from younger species, eager to earn respect by taunting the mysterious humans. The human ambassador did not respond at first. She listened calmly, her eyes moving from one delegate to another. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable, and at last she spoke, in a measured tone. She said that Earth had brought what mattered most, that peace was forged by words, not by weapons, and that trust was built through restraint, not fear. Her reply was elegant, but it only fueled the mocking voices, for they interpreted her calmness as evasion. A representative from the Zorath Dominion, a species known for cruelty, leaned forward and demanded to know the truth. He asked why Earth always avoided the question. Did they not have an army, or were they too ashamed to reveal their weakness? The chamber filled with murmurs and jeers as many turned to watch the humans, expecting them to crumble under pressure. The ambassador simply folded her hands before her and gave a faint smile, a smile that unsettled more than it reassured. For a brief moment the chamber was quiet, and then the ambassador spoke again. She said that Earth does not bring its military to summits, because summits are places for peace. She said that the human military is not meant to be shown like trophies or beasts on a leash, but to act only when every other choice has failed. Her voice was calm, yet the words struck like thunder. The mocking laughter faltered, replaced by uneasy silence. Still the proud and reckless refused to yield. A young warrior from the Coral species stood and shouted across the chamber, calling humans liars and cowards. He claimed that every great species proved its honor by displaying its strength, and that Earth had no right to sit among the stars if it could not show the same. The outburst broke the fragile quiet, and soon others joined their voices, demanding proof, demanding that Earth reveal the truth. But among the crowd, not all were laughing. A few remembered old battles that were buried in records hidden from common eyes. A veteran of the Varen fleet leaned toward his neighbor and whispered of a time when a small human force had turned back an invasion on a barren moon. The records said little, but those who fought there knew the humans were more than they appeared. His neighbor dismissed him, saying those were exaggerated tales, yet the unease in the veteran's eyes was real. The human ambassador let the storm of voices rise and fall without interruption. She waited until, at last, the council leader called for silence. Then she bowed her head and spoke one final time for that day. She said the truth was simple and dangerous, that Earth's armies are not meant for summits, because their presence ends summits. They are not peacekeepers, they are finishers. She said nothing more and sat down, her expression unreadable. The chamber erupted again with speculation. Some still mocked, but their laughter carried a nervous edge. Some grew suspicious and whispered that perhaps Earth was hiding a terrible weapon. Others dismissed it as human arrogance, yet even they could not ignore the steady confidence of a people who refused to be rattled. The question that had haunted the galaxy for decades only deepened, and for every taunt thrown at Earth, there was a growing sense of unease that perhaps the humans were not hiding weakness, but hiding strength too great to reveal. That night, as the delegates returned to their quarters, the corridors of the great station buzzed with rumors. Some predicted Earth would soon be forced to prove itself. Others whispered of wars long past where humans had fought like no other species. The mocking had turned serious, the jokes had become threats, and yet through it all, the humans moved calmly, as though they had expected every word, every insult, and every doubt. A subtle warning. The third day of the HFY summit began under a veil of tension, for the mocking voices had not silenced and the rumors had grown heavier throughout the station. Delegates entered the chamber with restless energy, some eager to push the humans further, some quietly wary of what answers might be forced into the open. The humans entered as always with calm steps and unguarded presence. They carried tablets filled with history and poetry, rather than weapons, and their ambassador walked with the same collected grace as before. The council leader granted the humans a chance to address the accusations that had lingered since the day before. The ambassador stepped forward, and for the first time she did not begin with greetings or courtesies. Instead, she opened with a story. A story of Earth itself, not dressed in glory but in tragedy. She spoke of wars so vast they scarred continents, of battles that consumed generations, and of weapons that turned night into burning day. The chamber grew silent as she described, cities erased in seconds, oceans poisoned, skies turned black with ash. Her words carried no pride and no triumph, only a steady recounting of history etched in pain. Some of the younger delegates laughed softly, calling it theater, calling it exaggeration, but their laughter faltered as the ambassador continued. She explained that humanity had learned peace not from kindness, but from the edge of extinction. She spoke of soldiers who fought not for conquest, but because survival demanded it. Soldiers who bled in mud and fire, refusing to yield even when hope had turned to dust. The tone of her voice carried no boasting. It carried a weight that pressed against the hearts of those listening, and though some dismissed it as stories, the older among the chamber did not. A grizzled commander of the Arkan Union shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He remembered a skirmish decades past on a forgotten frontier world. He remembered humans arriving as allies, barely equipped, yet unshakable in battle. He remembered their ferocity and their strange talent to adapt to every turn of combat. He leaned back and muttered that the humans were not weak, they were dangerous. His words went unheard in the rising tide of jeers from the proud. The ambassador paused and then gave what sounded less like a threat and more like a warning. She told the council that humanity's armies were never meant to be displayed as decorations or measured against the strength of others. She said they were meant only for one purpose: to be unleashed when every other path had failed, and when unleashed they would not stop until the conflict itself was broken. Her voice did not rise yet. The chamber felt colder and heavier with each word. One delegate scoffed, declaring that every species claimed its armies were unstoppable, that humans were no different. The ambassador simply looked at him with steady eyes and asked how many species had fought wars so violent that they feared to repeat them. How many had come so close to self-destruction that survival itself was the only lesson left? The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. The younger and arrogant brushed it away with laughter, but it was uneasy. Laughter strained and hollow. A few voices whispered to each other, recalling rumors of human mercenaries fighting in conflicts across the stars. Their stories were inconsistent, yet all carried the same note of unease. The humans never fought with the pomp of power. They fought with the desperation of survivors, and that desperation had shattered enemies greater in number and technology. As the day drew to an end, the council chambers closed, but the whispers followed into every corridor. The humans had spoken no threat, yet their stories carried the weight of warning. Some species dismissed them as dramatists. Others began to question their assumptions, and a few who had once mocked now spoke in hushed tones of caution. For if the stories held even a fraction of truth, then perhaps it was wise that Earth kept its armies away from summits. Perhaps the galaxy was safer not seeing what humanity truly kept hidden. The humans returned to their quarters silent and calm as ever. But beneath that calmness lay something more deliberate. Their restraint was not weakness. Their silence was not submission. Their history was not forgotten. It was a warning left unspoken except to those willing to listen. And though most of the chamber still laughed, the laughter no longer felt like victory. It felt like fear trying to hide itself in noise provocation at the summit. The fourth day of the summit opened with heavy tension hanging over the chamber. The speeches of the previous day still echoed in the minds of the delegates. Some repeated the human ambassador's words with mocking tones, while others carried unease in their voices. The council floor was restless, and the air was thick with the sense that something inevitable was about to happen. The Zorath Dominion, who had long despised Restraint were the first to strike with provocation. Their warlord, draped in armor made from the bones of slain beasts, stood and pointed across the chamber at the human delegation. His voice rumbled through the hall as he declared that Earth's traditions were nothing but excuses. He demanded that the humans bring their soldiers to the next summit or be cast out from the council entirely. His words were met with thunderous applause from some and nervous silence from others, for the demand had broken the unspoken rule of leaving Earth's mystery alone. The human ambassador rose slowly and calmly. She did not flinch at the threat, nor did she rush to respond. Instead, she let the silence stretch until the clamor faded, and then she spoke. In her measured voice, she told the warlord that Earth had no need to bring soldiers to a place meant for peace. She told him that forcing Earth to do so would not prove strength, but would only poison the very purpose of the summit. She said it as if it were the simplest truth, and yet the chamber did not accept it. The warlord snarled back, saying that only cowards hid their armies and that Earth's refusal was a stain upon the galaxy. He challenged Earth to stand equal among the stars by displaying what it had or admit its weakness before all. The crowd stirred with energy, some banging their fists against the tables in agreement, others whispering their doubts. The humans remained quiet and unarmed, their faces unreadable. Then, the ambassador lifted her eyes and gave her reply. It was not long, it was not loud, but it froze the chamber like ice. She said, "You do not want us to bring them." For a moment the chamber was stunned into silence, and then uneasy laughter erupted among the delegates. Some laughed because they thought it was bravado. Others laughed to hide the sudden chill that crept along their spines. The warlord himself laughed, but there was no humor in his voice, only anger at being defied. The council leader tried to restore order, but the damage had been done. The words of the ambassador spread like fire across the chamber, whispered and repeated in tones of disbelief and fear. "You do not want us to bring them." The phrase carried weight beyond its simplicity, and no one could shake the feeling that perhaps it was not a threat but a truth. The rest of the day's proceedings were chaotic as arguments flared between species. Some demanded Earth prove its worth. Others argued that forcing them would be foolish. A few older races who remembered scattered conflicts with humanity remained quiet, unwilling to push further. Their silence was noticed, and it only deepened the uncertainty. Why would those who had fought humans before hesitate now? By the time the chamber adjourned, the delegates spilled into the station corridors filled with speculation. The mocking that once rang with certainty now wavered with nervous energy. Some insisted Earth was bluffing. Others began to wonder if the humans carried a darkness the galaxy had never seen. The young warriors from the newer species still mocked, but even their laughter cracked at the edges. For the phrase had lodged itself in their minds. "You do not want us to bring them," in their private quarters. The human delegation remained silent. They did not celebrate, they did not argue. They simply prepared their notes for the following sessions and rested as though nothing had happened. Yet outside their doors, the galaxy buzzed with rumors and fears. The provocation had been delivered, the warning had been spoken, and now every species waited to see what Earth would do next, the leak. The fifth day of the summit did not begin with ceremony or speeches. Instead, it began with chaos. A report had been leaked into the council's shared archives, and within minutes every delegate had a copy scrolling across their datapads. The report was old, stamped as classified by several empires, but now its words burned through the chamber like wildfire. It was an account of a battle fought decades ago, far from any major world, on a barren rock of no value, except as a staging ground. The report described how 3 alien divisions had attempted to hold the ground against what was expected to be a small human force. The numbers were overwhelming, tens of thousands against only a few hundred humans. Yet the report detailed how the battle turned from a certain victory into a nightmare. The humans fought without hesitation, adapting their tactics with every setback. They used the terrain with terrifying creativity, turning empty canyons into traps and barren ridges into fortresses. Their soldiers did not break when flanked. They turned and struck from angles their enemies had never prepared for. The report claimed that entire armored columns vanished in ambushes, and that supply lines were cut with precision even under fire. Descriptions grew darker. Entire alien regiments broke not because they were destroyed but because their soldiers refused to face the humans again. The words ruthless and relentless appeared again and again in the report. The final pages described how the human force, though vastly outnumbered, emerged with control of the battlefield while the remnants of 3 divisions fled into the void. It was a defeat so absolute that the commanders who survived sealed the records out of shame. When the delegates finished reading, the chamber exploded in shouts. Some called the report false propaganda spread by human allies. Others swore they had heard whispers of this battle long ago. Some demanded to know why such documents were hidden. The council leader pounded for silence, but the uproar would not calm. The humans sat quietly, their ambassador with folded hands and a face as calm as stone. At last, the ambassador rose to speak. She confirmed the report was real. Her voice carried without pride or arrogance, only steady truth. She said the battle had been one of many, and that humanity had never spoken of it, because it had been war, not something to boast of. Her words silenced many in the chamber, for confirmation was worse than rumor. What had been dismissed as exaggeration was revealed as fact. A delegate from the younger coral species shouted that the report was proof of human savagery. He claimed that Earth was a threat to peace and should be expelled from the council. Others joined, him declaring that no species should wield such a military if it could fight like that. Yet there were voices that rose in defense, arguing that perhaps this was why humans refused to bring their armies to summits. Perhaps they hid them because they understood their own nature better than the rest of the galaxy. The debate raged, but beneath it all, fear began to take root. Delegates looked at the small human delegation with new eyes. They were no longer a people mocked for their absence of soldiers. They were a people hiding something vast and terrible behind polite smiles and calm voices. Every laugh, every jeer now felt hollow in the face of what had been revealed. In the corridors that night, rumors spread faster than light. Delegates whispered of other hidden reports of human soldiers defeating impossible odds, of campaigns erased from archives to hide shameful defeats. No one knew how many of the stories were true, but the possibility alone was enough to chill the bravest hearts. The phrase spoken by the ambassador the day before echoed louder now. "You do not want us to bring them." The humans returned again to their quarters without complaint, without visible concern. They behaved as though the chaos around them did not matter. They met quietly among themselves and then rested. Their restraint only deepened the mystery. For while the rest of the galaxy tore itself apart in fear and debate, the humans seemed to wait with patience, as though everything was unfolding exactly as they expected. The demonstration. The 6th day of the summit began under a storm of division. The leaked report had shaken the chamber to its core. Some species demanded immediate sanctions against Earth, fearing what might happen if their military was unleashed. Others called for restraint, arguing that provoking humanity further would bring disaster. The council chamber buzzed with voices raised in anger and fear, until finally, one aggressive faction pushed too far. The Zorath Dominion, whose warlord had already mocked Earth, stood again and declared that words and documents were not enough. They demanded proof. They challenged Earth to demonstrate its military in a controlled display, to show whether the stories of their power were myth or truth. The chamber erupted into noise. Some begged the Dominion to stay silent. Others supported the demand, saying the galaxy deserved to know. The humans sat quietly, as they always did, their ambassador calm while whispers swirled like fire around her. Finally, she rose, and after a long silence she agreed. But her agreement came with words that made the chamber uneasy. She said Earth would send not fleets nor armies, only a single strike team. She warned that what the council would see would be enough and perhaps too much. But since the demand had been made, humanity would answer. The following day, the demonstration was arranged on a neutral training world watched by thousands through holographic feeds. The sky above the barren landscape shimmered with projection screens showing every movement of the combatants. The Dominion had sent a battalion of their finest warriors, armored and armed with weapons that had conquered a dozen worlds. They stood proud and confident, their numbers filling the horizon. Then from the human transport stepped only 12 soldiers clad in simple armor, carrying weapons that seemed almost plain compared to the alien machines. The crowd of delegates gasped at the small number. Some laughed openly, claiming Earth was insulting them. Others whispered uneasily, remembering the leaked report. The signal was given and the demonstration began. The Dominion forces advanced in formation, their heavy weapons firing beams that scorched the ground where the humans stood. But the human soldiers moved with precision, splitting apart, vanishing into cover, then striking from unexpected angles. In moments, the battlefield erupted in chaos. Dominion units fell not because of overwhelming firepower, but because the humans predicted their movements before they made them. They turned every ridge and crater into an ambush. Their weapons fired with unerring aim, and their movements were so coordinated, it seemed as if they shared one mind. Minutes passed, and the battalion that had marched with pride was breaking apart. Soldiers who had never known defeat were retreating in confusion, trying to regroup against an enemy that seemed everywhere at once. The human strike team advanced relentlessly, never hesitating, never faltering. They did not roar or boast. They fought in silence with cold precision, and each action carried the weight of experience honed over countless battles. The Dominion warlord who watched from the command platform grew pale as his finest troops collapsed before a handful of humans. The delegates in the chamber who watched through projection feeds fell into stunned silence. No one spoke as they witnessed the battalion forced into surrender in less than an hour. 12 humans stood alone on the battlefield, surrounded by the defeated remnants of a force that had once looked unstoppable. The demonstration had not only answered the demand, it had crushed every doubt. The rumors and stories had been true. When the human ambassador stepped forward to speak after the demonstration, her voice was steady. She said, "This is why Earth does not bring soldiers to summits." She said the military of humanity is not a tool for politics, not a decoration for display. It is a blade, kept sheathed until the moment it must be drawn, and when it is drawn it does not return until the conflict is ended. Her words settled over the chamber, like a weight too heavy to lift. For the first time since the summit began, there was no laughter, no jeering, no mocking. The council had demanded to see the truth, and the truth had been given. 12 human soldiers had shown what thousands could not stand against, and the galaxy finally began to understand why Earth kept its armies hidden. The silence that followed was not peace but fear, mixed with respect. Fear of what humanity could unleash. Respect for the restraint that kept it hidden. The final revelation. The council chamber was filled with silence as the demonstration ended. The echoes of the battle replayed in the minds of every delegate. 12 human soldiers had broken a force that should have overwhelmed them. The images of Dominion warriors kneeling in surrender haunted even the proudest empires. For the first time in living memory, the laughter and taunts had vanished. The chamber that once rang with mockery now trembled with a heavy respect, born not of admiration, but of fear. The human ambassador stood at the center of the chamber and raised her eyes to meet the gathered species. Her expression was calm yet firm, and her words carried with clarity across the vast hall. She said that Earth does not bring soldiers to peace summits because soldiers are not symbols. Soldiers are not trophies. Soldiers are not meant to be paraded like banners of pride. She said that the armies of humanity are not built for intimidation, but for survival, and when they are called into action, they do not stop until the fight is finished. Her words carried no arrogance, but every syllable cut through the chamber like steel. She spoke of how humanity had learned too well the cost of war, how their own history was marked by battles that had nearly erased them. She said Earth had chosen restraint not because it lacked strength, but because it feared what would happen if that strength was unleashed too often. Humanity had built its armies not to win admiration, but to ensure survival, and survival demanded a finality that no other species truly understood. The delegates shifted uneasily. Some remembered the leaked reports of past battles. Some could not forget what they had seen only hours before. A small strike team had shattered, a battalion not with overwhelming firepower but with relentless determination and perfect precision. They realized now that the phrase spoken days before had not been bravado. "You do not want us to bring them" was the truth spoken plainly. Humanity, had shown the galaxy only a glimpse, and even that glimpse had changed everything. The Zorath warlord who had provoked the humans sat in silence, his arrogance burned away by the humiliation of defeat. His once proud voice was gone, replaced by a pale and shaken silence. The other aggressive species who had mocked Earth lowered their eyes, unable to challenge what they had seen. The veterans who had warned of human strength said nothing, but their silence carried a weight of vindication. The young species who had once laughed now whispered among themselves, fearful and awed. The ambassador delivered her final words. She said Earth would always send diplomats to the Council, for peace was the path humanity sought. But if ever the day came when peace failed, if ever the galaxy chose war, then the armies of Earth would come not as negotiators, not as symbols, but as the storm that ends all storms. She told them that humanity did not parade its soldiers because peace was fragile and fragile. Things must be protected, not shattered. Her words ended, not in a shout, but in a quiet tone that echoed louder than thunder. The council leader rose slowly, and for the first time he bowed his head toward the human delegation. He did not speak, for all but his gesture carried through the chamber. One by one, delegates began to shift their tone. The mocking was gone, replaced by solemn recognition. Some whispered promises to never provoke Earth. Others sat in silence, unwilling to admit fear, yet unable to deny the truth. Humanity had revealed what it had hidden for generations, and the galaxy would never forget. When the session ended, the human delegation left, as they had arrived, quietly and without spectacle. They carried no banners. They marched with no guards, yet every eye in the chamber followed them with caution and respect. The corridors of the station buzzed with whispers, but none dared laugh any longer. For the mystery of Earth's absence of soldiers at summits was solved, and the answer was far more terrifying than anyone had expected. Earth did not bring its military because peace required restraint. Earth did not bring its soldiers because their very presence was a promise of finality. Humanity understood better than any other that if their armies were ever unleashed, there would be no negotiation, no balance, no compromise, only victory. The humans departed into the stars, leaving behind a silence that would last long after the summit ended. The galaxy now knew the truth, and with that truth came both fear and respect. The story of why Earth never brought its military to peace. Summits would spread across the stars, told not as a tale of weakness, but as a warning, whispered in hushed voices. And though the humans had spoken calmly, their message would never be forgotten. The last truth. The council chamber had become a place of silence, heavy and deep, as though every word spoken in days before had been washed away by the demonstration. The image of 12 human soldiers standing victorious over a broken battalion would not fade from the minds of those who had seen it. The fear and awe mixed in every heart left no room for laughter. Humanity had spoken its warning, and the galaxy had finally understood. The human ambassador stood once more at the center, her voice steady but softer than before. She told the delegates that humanity had learned the weight of war not from tales, but from living through it again and again. She said that on Earth history itself was carved in the scars of battle, that the soil held the bones of those who fought for survival, that the skies had once burned so brightly with fire that whole generations were shaped by its light. She said the soldiers of Earth were not built to impress councils or to stand as ornaments, but to ensure that their people endured, and because of that, they carried a finality that could not be shown without consequence. Her words fell into the chamber like stones into deep water, spreading ripples through every corner. She explained that Earth did not bring its military to peace summits because the very sight of them would poison the purpose of gathering together. She said their armies were not symbols of prestige. They were the answer when all else had failed, and once that answer was given, it was absolute. The ambassadors of other species shifted in their seats, trying to look away, yet unable to ignore the truth that trembled in every syllable. The council leader rose and asked quietly if Earth's restraint was permanent. The ambassador met his gaze and answered that Earth desired peace more than war, and that as long as peace was possible, they would walk into the chamber with words rather than weapons. But she reminded him and every delegate that if peace was ever broken completely, then Earth would not hesitate to send what they had hidden for so long. And once they arrived, the war would end swiftly and decisively. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The warlords who once mocked Earth sat pale and shaken. The proud warriors who had demanded proof bowed their heads in shame. The younger species whispered to each other, afraid to speak too loudly, as if even their voices might summon what they had witnessed. The galaxy now carried a new understanding of Earth. They were not weak, they were not arrogant, they were not careless. They were restrained because they knew the true cost of unleashing their strength. As the session closed, the humans left the chamber as quietly as they had entered. They carried no banners, they sang no hymns, they marched with no soldiers yet. Every eye followed them with a weight of respect and fear. The corridors filled with hushed voices repeating the words spoken days before. "You do not want us to bring them." Those words had changed meaning entirely for now. They were not dismissed as bravado, but carried as a truth that could not be denied. The galaxy would remember this summit, for generations, not as a time of treaties or trade, but as the moment they learned why Earth walked the path of restraint. The story would be told and retold across the stars, and each time it would remind every species that humanity did not parade its armies because they were too dangerous to be displayed. Their power was not for show, it was for the end. And so the summit ended with no laughter, only silence, and the humans returned to their world, leaving behind a galaxy that would never look at them the same way again. The end.